Hello and welcome to our tutorial sewing guide for our 7.8-inch GLoA e-reader case. In this guide, I'll be walking you through the included stitching manual for both our stock case as well as for the Kobo Aura 1 case. If you need a new manual, you can download a digital copy of it from our website. Please use the links in the video description. When you unbox your e-reader case, you'll find various plastic and non-plastic components. For the plastic components, you'll find the front plastic and the back plastic with the arms for your e-reader attached. You'll see text on the front plastic and the back side of the arms to specify which e-reader they belong to, as well as its revisioning. If the arms require specific orientation, you will also find designated L and R markings, which correspond to the L and R markings on the back plastic. For non-plastic components, you'll find the pre-cut material for the cover, liner or spine, and latch in either leather or cloth. You'll also have screws which are currently attached to the arms. Now, it is very important to keep the material's orientation in mind to ensure that your case has the right fit and feel. For leather, the smooth side will be on the front, which will be exposed, and the fluffy side is going to be on the back, which will be on the inside of the case. For cloth, the color side with the soft texture is on the front, which is exposed, while the smooth glossy side that's blackened is on the back, which will be inside the case. While on most of the materials this orientation might be obvious, especially if it's colored, it can be very difficult to tell if your material is black. For tools and parts, we included with our GLoA e-reader kits a small spool with more than enough thread to stitch the case, as well as 2 leather sewing needles. If you've lost or need replacements for any of the included components, we do sell them on our store at 16bitstore.com. Otherwise, the specs for our parts can be found in our manuals. Now, there are just a few extra tools that you'll need before you can start sewing, including a PH1 Phillips screwdriver to screw and unscrew the arms, a lighter to finish off the knot on the e-reader case, a pair of scissors to cut any remaining thread, and while it's not necessary, it's also good to have a sharp pointed instrument like this vinyl weeder tool or a pair of tweezers to help loosen thread, widen holes that may be cut too small, or to assist with unstitching the case if a mistake was made. Technically, you can use the included sewing needles for this, but I found a vinyl weeder tool to be very helpful when a mistake is made or to help undo an especially tight knot. Let's start by unspooling the thread from the spool and threading one of our needles. We won't need the second needle until the end. We are going to start by sewing the back plastic to the cover. Align the back plastic with the cover as shown and thread the needle through the back of the cover and through the plastic of the second hole on the top right. I personally also like sewing it through the top side row as well. For demonstration purposes, this guide will show the case being shown on a table, but please do not use a table while you stitch the case. Instead, we advise you to be sitting down with the edge that you are stitching facing you. This will help reduce knotting and tangling, as well as making simple mistakes a lot more apparent before it's too late to fix. Next, you'll want to pull the thread all the way through until a small amount is left on the back side, enough that you can grab it with 2 fingers. Then you're going to pull the thread through back twice, as this should give you more than enough thread to stitch back on when we reach the end. Finally, we can finish our first hole with a vertical hem stitch. From the top side row, loop back through the back plastic and the back cover. Do not stitch through the top row again, as this will undo the stitch and you're going to have to start again. From here, pull the thread all the way through the hole and move down 1 hole to the left and stitch again through all 3 layers. Please do not stitch multiple vertical hem stitches at the same time, as you'll have a higher chance of not just ripping your material, but also damaging your case. Please only stitch one vertical hem stitch at a time. Another thing, please note that the stitch holes will be easy to feel out and shouldn't require any significant force to go back through. If you're having trouble stitching through the holes, please take a vinyl weeder tool or a pair of tweezers and widen the hole. Finally, finish the vertical hem stitch by looping back through the back plastic and the cover to finish the hole. As you start stitching the thread, you'll notice that it's going to be very easy, or at least it really wants to tangle itself. So be very wary of knotting, especially if a knot is too big, since it can accidentally widen or potentially rip holes. This is more likely to happen on cloth rather than the leather. Now, if you have yourself a Kobo or a 1 case, this is where we're going to start stitching the buttonhole. If you have yourself a stock case, then please skip ahead to this time marker and continue repeating the same stitch as we've done, and remember to tighten. To start sewing the buttonhole, go back through the buttonhole and to the first hole on the button to the right, going through the back plastic and through the back cover. Continue doing this stitch until you've reached the top row again. From here, continue the same stitch, but this time through the top row and through the cover. Be very careful here, as the material is thin and very likely to rip if you put too much force on it or if you try to pull a knot through it. Continue this and continue being careful until you've returned back to the first hole in the buttonhole. Then circle back, being very careful on the first 3 holes and going back through the back plastic and cover right until you've reached the first hole again on the buttonhole. We'll finish off the buttonhole by doing 2 more whip stitches through the top side row and cover all the way until we have exited the button row on the left side. From here, continue doing a vertical hem stitch until you've reached the second to last hole on the back plastic. Please remember to tighten the thread as you go along. While you can tighten the cloth a little more than the leather, you shouldn't tighten it too much, or you may accidentally rip the leather in the process. While ripping 1 or 2 holes isn't the end of the world, it will make the stitch look uneven and the ripped area more likely to fray on the cloth material. From here, we'll need to align the liner or spine with the cut patterns on the cover. Then we'll need to sew through the cover, then the back plastic, then through the top right corner of the spine or liner, and finish by going through the top side row and completing our vertical hem stitch by going back through the spine or liner, back plastic, and cover. The spine or liner will be loose until we stitch it down, and this is where we begin our running stitch. You do this by going down 1 hole, stitching through the cover, back plastic, then through the spine or liner, and pulling the thread through. Then moving down another hole, going through the spine or liner, back plastic, and cover. Repeating this pattern until you've hit the last hole. Now, to speed up this process, you don't have to pull the thread through each hole, though it's recommended. From our testing, we were able to go through 2 holes at a time. Though 3 does work, I found it to be a bit too tight and difficult to pull the thread through that much material. So we highly recommend to stick to at least 2 holes at a time. Once you've reached the bottom, do not start a vertical hem stitch, as we will do this when we stitch the lower row of holes. Instead, it's time to double back and finish our running stitch by going in the opposite direction and finishing by going through the already stitched hole at the top. Continue to the left with a vertical hem stitch going through the cover, spine or liner, then the top side row, and going back through the spine or liner and cover. And continue until you've reached the second row of stitching holes for the spine. Now it's time to align the front plastic. As the front plastic contains the sleeve magnet, it is very important to align this correctly. The magnet should be exposed, and the text for the sleeve cover model should be visible in the bottom left corner. And finally, there is a little alignment dot on the side that should be on the right. When you have aligned your sleeve cover, you'll then want to thread your needle through the cover, front plastic, spine or liner, and your top side row, finishing the vertical hem stitch by going back through the liner or spine, front plastic, and cover. From here, you'll need to do another running stitch down the front plastic like you did with the back plastic. Like the spine or the liner, your front plastic will be loose until it's stitched down. So be sure that when you are sewing it in place, that the needle actually goes through the front plastic, as it has a tendency to avoid it. Once you've completed your running stitch, continue doing the vertical hem stitch, being sure to include the liner by going through the cover, front plastic, liner, top side row, and looping back through the liner, front plastic, and cover until you've reached the first corner. Now, stitching a corner is rather straightforward. Do a normal vertical hem stitch by going through the last hole, front plastic, the top side row, but before you go back through, also include the first hole on the left side row. Then thread you through the liner if you have it, front plastic, and cover. Do not tighten this hole just yet, as you should stitch at least one hole down from the corner you are working on. Then tighten before you loop back through. This is very important since it helps the cover lay perfectly with both sides and gives you an opportunity to make any adjustments to the corner if needed. With a cloth case, this isn't as necessary, but for a leather case where the material is a lot stiffer, you may need to even massage the corners to get it to look and feel right. Continue stitching as we've done until the next corner and up to the second row of the spine, which is unstitched. Like before, we'll want to do a vertical hem stitch on the first hole, then do a running stitch, but this time just going through the liner or spine and the cover. Continue doing this running stitch until you make it back, vertical hem stitch until the opposite side's unstitched spine, and then do a running stitch on that side as well. At this point, everything is just rinse and repeat until we've hit the right side of the e-reader case. And here we're going to go and attach the latch by going through the cover, back plastic, the latch, and the right side row. Then going back through the plastic and the cover. Do not go back through the latch since the fabric's going to look a little weird. From here, we'll actually want to take the extra thread that we set aside from the start and thread it into our second needle, since we'll need to determine how much extra thread we have left. The reason this is important is because we'll need to figure out which side has the most thread, since it will determine how we stitch the latch going forward. If it's hard to determine which side is longer, as the manual specifies, please sew until both sides of the case until you've hit 2 holes before the latch. Then check again. At this point, it should be apparent which side is longer. If not, just pick your favorite side. Since once the right side is gone, we are going to go through the back, through the cover, through the back plastic, through the latch, then back through the back plastic and the cover anyways. Continue this vertical hem stitch until you've hit the opposite side of the latch, but before you go and touch the other right side. If, on the other hand, it's very obvious to determine which side is longer, then you can stitch that side all the way until you've hit the opposite side of the latch before you've hit the right side edge that hasn't been stitched down yet. And if you have so much excess, you can even skip ahead and stitch the latch. But for the purposes of this guide, we'll walk you through the proper next steps. Next, we'll want to start stitching the shorter thread until it's in the same hole as the longer thread, but on the opposite side of the case. From here, we can start the saddle stitch for the latch. I personally do the saddle stitch with one thread at a time, starting with the longer thread, but you can stitch both sides at a time if it works better for you. When you've completed the stitch, please take the bottom thread and go back through one of the holes to its top or bottom to complete your case. Please note that if you've miscalculated how much thread is needed on the latch, you can double back with the longer thread and make the knot wherever the shorter thread ran out. The included thread will be long enough to stitch this case with a lot of room to spare. So, once your e-reader case is finished, take the remaining thread and double knot it. Then you're going to cut the string above the knot and twist it such that it will stand up on its own. Please do not cut the thread too long, as it may leave char marks once we start to burn it, since what we're going to do now is actually melt the wax in the thread to get a permanent seal so it won't come on undone. So take your lighter and light the tip of the thread like a candle, and wait until the flame reaches the knot before blowing it out and quickly smacking the butt of the lighter on the knot. This will flatten it, making the knot permanent. Now simply attach the left and right arms to their respective sides if they specify it, and place your e-reader into the case by either sliding it to the bottom of the case and pressing down on the top left and right corners, or by sliding the e-reader to the left or right side and pressing down on the opposite side and the bottom corner. To remove your e-reader, simply pull back on the arms from the corners and the e-reader will be released from the case. With that done, your e-reader case is completed. While it's simple enough to replace the arms if they were to ever break, if you need to replace the front or back plastics, either because you got yourself a new sleep cover or because something catastrophic happens, you will need to unstitch and restitch the entire case. As well, if your cloth starts to fray, please do not pluck the thread, as it will only cause it to get worse. We advise you to actually burn the thread, since it will not loosen the rest of the weave. As always, we will have spare parts and pre-cut thread available on 16-Bit Store if you ever need more. As always, thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you found this guide helpful, and as always, take care.